Story 1. The Silent Struggles of Maria. Maria had always been a dreamer. Born in a small village, her world was limited to the dusty roads, the smell of freshly baked bread from her mother's kitchen, and the warmth of her father's laughter. But life took a sharp turn when her mother passed away unexpectedly. Maria was only 10 years old, and the loss left a deep void in her heart. Her father remarried a year later, bringing a stepmother into their home. This woman, Victoria, was nothing like Maria's mother. She was cold, distant, and often harsh with her words. The once warm and loving home Maria knew became a place of tension and unease. Victoria made it clear that Maria was not her own and treated her more like a burden than a daughter. Maria's father, blinded by his new love, didn't see the struggles his daughter was facing. He was a good man, but he was also a man who worked long hours to provide for his family, leaving Maria alone with Victoria most of the time. Victoria's cruelty was subtle, but effective. She would make snide remarks about Maria's looks, intelligence, and even her dreams of becoming a writer. Maria began to doubt herself, believing that she was worthless. As the years passed, Maria found solace in books. She would escape into the worlds created by authors, imagining herself as the strong, brave heroines she read about. But even this escape was not enough to shield her from the harsh realities of her life. Victoria continued to belittle her, and Maria's self-esteem plummeted. When Maria turned 18, she was ready to leave the house and start a new life. She had saved up enough money to move to the city and attend university. However, Victoria did everything in her power to stop her. She told Maria that she was not smart enough for university, that she would fail, and that she should stay home and help with the household chores. Despite her stepmother's words, Maria was determined to go. She packed her bags and left in the middle of the night, leaving behind a note for her father. She didn't want to face him, knowing that he would try to convince her to stay. The city was a daunting place, but Maria was determined to make a life for herself. University was challenging, but Maria thrived. She made friends, learned new things, and began to rebuild her self-esteem. But the wounds left by Victoria were deep, and they didn't heal overnight. Maria often doubted herself, wondering if she was truly capable of achieving her dreams. She struggled with feelings of inadequacy, and sometimes she wanted to give up. One day, Maria met a man named James. He was kind, funny, and supportive, everything that Victoria was not. James encouraged Maria to pursue her dreams, and with his support, she began to believe in herself again. They fell in love, and for the first time in years, Maria felt truly happy. But life had one more test for Maria. She received a call from her father, telling her that Victoria was gravely ill. Despite everything, Maria felt a pang of sadness. She decided to visit her stepmother, unsure of what she would find. When she arrived at the hospital, Victoria was barely recognizable. The once strong and intimidating woman was now frail and weak. She looked up at Maria with tear-filled eyes and apologized for everything she had done. She confessed that she had been jealous of Maria's youth and beauty, and that she had taken out her own insecurities on her stepdaughter. Maria was shocked, but she forgave Victoria. She realized that holding on to the anger and resentment would only continue to hurt her. Letting go of the past was the only way to truly move forward. Victoria passed away shortly after, and Maria returned to the city. She graduated from university with honors and became a successful writer. Her books, inspired by her own struggles, helped countless people who were going through similar experiences. Maria married James, and together they built a life filled with love and happiness. She never forgot the lessons she learned from her time with Victoria, but she no longer let them define her. Maria's story was one of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of believing in oneself. Story 2. The Illusion of Love. Rachel was known for her beauty. With her radiant smile and sparkling eyes, she had always attracted attention wherever she went. But behind her enchanting exterior, Rachel carried a secret, a deep longing for true love, something that had always eluded her. She had grown up in a small town where everyone knew each other, and by the time she was in her early 20s, she had already dated a few men. Each relationship started with passion and excitement, but it never lasted. The men she dated would eventually show their true colors: selfish, dishonest, or simply uninterested in commitment. Disappointed and heartbroken, Rachel began to question if true love even existed. One day she met Nathan. He was charming, confident, and said all the right things. Nathan was unlike anyone Rachel had ever met. He made her feel special, constantly showering her with compliments and gifts. Rachel felt like she was living in a dream, finally experiencing the kind of love she had always longed for. Nathan and Rachel quickly became inseparable. He introduced her to his friends and took her on luxurious vacations. Rachel was swept off her feet, believing that Nathan was the one she had been waiting for. She ignored the small red flags: how Nathan was always secretive about his phone, how he would disappear for days without explanation, and how he avoided talking about the future. As time went on, Nathan's behavior became more erratic. He would get angry over small things and would often accuse Rachel of being too needy or clingy. Rachel, desperate to keep the relationship intact, began to change herself to please Nathan. She stopped seeing her friends, gave up her hobbies, and did everything she could to keep Nathan happy. But nothing was ever enough. One evening, Rachel decided to surprise Nathan at his apartment. She brought over his favorite meal and planned a romantic evening. However, when she arrived, she found the door slightly ajar. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, only to find Nathan with another woman. The shock and betrayal hit her like a ton of bricks. Nathan quickly tried to explain, saying it was just a mistake, that the other woman meant nothing to him. But Rachel knew better. She could see the truth in his eyes. Nathan had been deceiving her all along. The illusion of love that she had clung to shattered in an instant. Heartbroken, Rachel left Nathan's apartment and walked aimlessly through the city streets. She felt lost and empty, unsure of how she would ever recover from this betrayal. But as she walked, she began to realize something important. Nathan's betrayal was not a reflection of her worth. She had been searching for love in the wrong places, with the wrong people. Rachel decided it was time to focus on herself. She moved to a new city, started a new job, and began to rediscover who she was outside of a relationship. She reconnected with old friends, took up painting, and started therapy to work through her emotional scars. It was a long and painful journey, but slowly, Rachel began to heal. Months later, Rachel met someone new, Lucas. He was kind, patient, and honest. Unlike Nathan, Lucas never made her feel insecure or question her worth. He supported her in everything she did and encouraged her to be the best version of herself. Their relationship grew slowly, built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. For the first time in her life, Rachel experienced what real love felt like: calm, steady, and genuine. She realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or fleeting passions. It was about finding someone who accepted her for who she was, flaws and all. Rachel and Lucas built a life together, filled with laughter, adventures, and unconditional support. Rachel never forgot the pain of her past, but she no longer let it define her. She had learned to see through the illusions of love and found something real, something worth holding on to. Story 3. The Shadows of Betrayal. Lena was the kind of woman who believed in the goodness of people. Her friends often said she had a heart of gold, always ready to help, always willing to forgive. But that trusting nature would soon be put to the ultimate test. Lena had been in a relationship with her boyfriend Aaron for nearly 3 years. They had met at a mutual friend's party and clicked instantly. Aaron was everything Lena had ever wanted: charming, attentive, and funny. They moved in together after a year, and Lena was convinced that Aaron was the one she would spend the rest of her life with. They shared a small but cozy apartment in the city, where Lena worked as a graphic designer and Aaron as a photographer. Their lives were intertwined in every way. Shared mornings over coffee, long walks in the park, and quiet nights watching movies. Lena had never been happier. But things began to change when Erin started working with a new client, Sophie. She was a model, and Erin was hired to take photos for her portfolio. At first, Lena didn't think much of it. She trusted Erin completely and knew his work often involved attractive women. But as time went on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Erin began coming home later and later, often with the excuse of extra shoots or last-minute edits. When Lena would ask about his day, Erin would give vague answers, quickly changing the subject. Lena tried to ignore her growing suspicions, but the unease gnawed at her. One evening, Erin left his phone on the kitchen counter while he took a shower. A message from Sophie flashed on the screen, and Lena's heart skipped a beat. She didn't want to invade his privacy, but curiosity and fear got the better of her. She opened the message and found a string of flirty texts and plans to meet up, plans Erin had never mentioned to Lena. Lena's world crumbled around her as she read through the messages. She felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and betrayal. How could Erin, the man she loved and trusted, be doing this to her? She didn't confront him immediately, unsure of how to process the revelation. Instead, Lena started observing Erin more closely. She noticed the subtle changes in his behavior, how he would smile at his phone, how he was more distant with her, and how he made excuses to spend time away from home. It was clear that Erin was having an affair with Sophie, and Lena's worst fears were confirmed. Finally, Lena decided she couldn't live in the shadows of betrayal any longer. She confronted Erin, showing him the messages she had found. Erin's face went pale, and he stammered out a half-hearted apology, claiming it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything. But Lena knew better. She could see the truth in his eyes. The betrayal cut deep, and Lena knew there was no going back. She packed her things and left the apartment that very night, leaving behind the life she had built with Erin. The pain was overwhelming, but Lena was determined to move forward, to rebuild her life without the man who had shattered her trust. Lena moved in with a friend while she searched for her own place. She threw herself into her work, trying to distract herself from the heartache. But the nights were the hardest, lying alone in the dark. Her mind would replay the betrayal over and over. She wondered if she would ever be able to trust again, if she would ever be able to love without fear. Over time, Lena began to heal. She started going to therapy, where she worked through the pain and learned to rebuild her self-esteem. She realized that Erin's betrayal was not a reflection of her worth, but of his own flaws. Lena also reconnected with old friends, who reminded her of the strong, independent woman she had always been. Months passed, and Lena found herself in a new apartment, with a fresh start and a renewed sense of self. She was no longer the naive woman who believed blindly in the goodness of people. She had learned a valuable lesson about trust, but she also learned that she could survive even the deepest wounds. One day, Lena met someone new, Daniel. He was kind, patient, and understanding. Unlike Erin, Daniel was open and honest from the start. He didn't try to rush their relationship, giving Lena the space she needed to heal. Slowly, Lena began to open her heart again, allowing herself to feel the stirrings of love. But this time, Lena was wiser. She knew that love wasn't just about grand gestures or passionate moments. It was about trust, respect, and communication. With Daniel, Lena found a love that was real, one that didn't need to hide in the shadows. Lena's journey wasn't easy, but it made her stronger. She had faced betrayal and come out on the other side, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And in the end, she found that love could still be beautiful, even after all the pain. Story 4. The Price of Ambition. David had always been driven by ambition. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he dreamed of a life far beyond the confines of his upbringing. He wanted success, power, and wealth, things his parents had never known. From a young age, David worked hard, excelling in school and eventually landing a scholarship to a prestigious university. At university, David thrived. He was focused, determined, and quickly made a name for himself among his peers. While others partied and enjoyed their youth, David spent his nights studying, planning, and preparing for the future he envisioned. It wasn't long before he graduated at the top of his class and secured a high-paying job at a leading investment firm. David's career took off quickly. He was talented, charismatic, and willing to do whatever it took to climb the corporate ladder. His superiors noticed his drive, and he was promoted faster than anyone else in his cohort. By the time he was in his early 30s, David was already a senior executive, earning a salary that most people could only dream of. With success came the trappings of wealth. David bought a luxury apartment in the heart of the city, drove a sports car, and wore designer suits. He was living the life he had always wanted, but it came at a cost. His work consumed him, leaving little time for anything else. Friends and relationships fell by the wayside, as David prioritized his career above all else. One day, David met Emily. She was different from the women he usually dated. She was smart, independent, and not easily impressed by his wealth or status. Emily was a successful architect with her own career, and she valued balance in her life. Despite their differences, David and Emily were drawn to each other, and they quickly fell in love. Emily brought a sense of calm and perspective to David's life that he had never known. She encouraged him to take breaks, to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, and to reconnect with the people who mattered to him. For a while, David tried to find a balance between his career and his relationship with Emily, but the demands of his job always seemed to win. As David continued to climb the corporate ladder, he became more distant from Emily. He spent long hours at the office, often working late into the night and traveling frequently for business. Emily tried to be understanding, but she began to feel neglected and unimportant in David's life. The more David focused on his career, the more their relationship suffered. One evening, after another long day at the office, David came home to find Emily packing her bags. She had reached her breaking point. She could no longer be in a relationship where she felt like a second priority. David was shocked and pleaded with her to stay, promising to change. But it was too late. Emily loved David, but she knew she deserved more than what he was willing to give. Emily left, and David was devastated. He threw himself even deeper into his work, using it as a distraction from the pain of losing her. But as the weeks turned into months, David began to realize the emptiness of his life. He had achieved everything he had ever wanted: success, wealth, and power, but he was lonely and unfulfilled. David started to question the choices he had made. He had sacrificed love, friendships, and his own happiness in pursuit of his ambitions. He began to see that success wasn't just about career achievements or material wealth. It was about living a balanced, meaningful life. Determined to change, David reached out to Emily, hoping to reconcile. He explained how he had come to understand the importance of balance and how much he regretted the way he had treated her. Emily listened, but she had moved on, finding happiness in a new relationship with someone who valued her in a way David hadn't. Heartbroken, David decided it was time to take a step back. He took a sabbatical from work, something he never thought he would do, and began to focus on his personal life. He reconnected with old friends, took up hobbies he had abandoned years ago, and started volunteering at a local charity. Slowly, David began to find a new sense of purpose. As time passed, David found peace in his new life. He wasn't as successful as he had once been, at least not in the traditional sense, but he was happier. He learned to value the things that truly mattered: love, relationships, and personal fulfillment. David realized that ambition was important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of everything else. David's story is a reminder that while ambition can drive us to achieve great things, it can also blind us to what's truly important in life. Success is not just about wealth or power, but about finding a balance that allows us to enjoy the journey as much as the destination. Story 5. The Silent House. In a quiet suburb on the outskirts of a bustling city, there stood an old house that had long been forgotten by time. The house was large, with towering gables and a wraparound porch that creaked in the wind. It had once been grand, a symbol of wealth and prestige, but now it was dilapidated, its windows boarded up and its paint peeling away like the memories of those who had lived there. For years, the house had remained empty, shrouded in mystery. Neighbors whispered about its dark past, speaking of strange occurrences and the family that had lived there long ago. Some said the house was haunted, that it held secrets too terrible to be spoken aloud. But no one really knew the truth. no one except for Alice. Alice had grown up in that house. She had been a child when her family moved in, excited by the prospect of living in such a magnificent place. But the excitement quickly faded as strange things began to happen. At first, it was just small things. Footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, doors that would open and close on their own, and lights that flickered without cause. Alice's parents dismissed the occurrences as the quirks of an old house, but Alice knew better. She could feel it, the presence in the house, watching, waiting. At night, she would lie awake in bed, listening to the whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves, too scared to sleep. As the years passed, the strange occurrences grew more frequent and more intense. Objects would move on their own, shadows would dart across the walls, and the whispers became louder, more insistent. Alice tried to tell her parents, but they wouldn't listen. They were too consumed by their own lives, too blinded by the house's former grandeur to see the truth. One night, when Alice was just 13 years old, the house reached out to her in a way that could no longer be ignored. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when she felt a cold breeze brush against her skin. The room grew icy, and Alice's breath came out in visible puffs. She heard the creak of the door as it slowly opened, and then she saw it, a figure, tall and dark, standing in the doorway. Alice froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure moved towards her, silent and menacing. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and bony, and touched her forehead. A wave of coldness washed over Alice, and then everything went black. When Alice woke up, she was no longer in her bed. She was standing in the middle of the living room, the house dark and silent around her. She was alone, but she could feel the presence watching her, lurking in the shadows. It whispered to her, words she couldn't understand, but that filled her with a deep sense of dread. From that night on, Alice was never the same. She became withdrawn, distant, and fearful. The presence in the house grew stronger, feeding off her fear, until it consumed her completely. Alice's parents noticed the change in their daughter, but they were too late. The house had already claimed her. One day, Alice disappeared. Her parents searched everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found. They called the police, who searched the house from top to bottom, but there was no sign of Alice. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The loss of their daughter devastated Alice's parents, and they eventually moved away, unable to bear living in the house any longer. The house was left to rot, its secrets buried within its walls. Years passed, and the house became the stuff of local legend. Children dared each other to enter, but none were brave enough to venture inside. The house remained silent, waiting, until one day a new family moved in. The Johnsons were a young couple with a baby on the way. They were thrilled to find such a large house for such a low price and didn't pay any mind to the stories the neighbors told them. They moved in, unaware of the darkness that lurked within. It didn't take long for the house to make itself known. The strange occurrences began almost immediately. Footsteps in the hallway, doors that opened and closed on their own, and whispers in the night. At first, the Johnsons tried to ignore it, but the presence in the house grew more insistent. One night, Mrs. Johnson woke up to find her husband standing at the foot of their bed, staring down at her with a blank expression on his face. She called out to him, but he didn't respond. His eyes were empty, his face pale and lifeless. And then he spoke, but it wasn't his voice that came out. It was the voice of the house, a low, menacing whisper that sent chills down her spine. The presence had claimed him, just as it had claimed Alice all those years ago. Mrs. Johnson fled the house with her baby, never to return. The house was once again abandoned, left to decay, its secrets buried in the darkness. But the house wasn't done. It remained, waiting for its next victim, feeding off the fear of those who dared to enter. It was a silent house, but within its walls, the darkness lived on, whispering its terrible secrets to those who would listen. Story 6. The Betrayal of Trust. Rebecca had always believed in love, true, unwavering love that could withstand anything. She had grown up watching her parents, who had been together for over 30 years, and had hoped to find something similar in her own life. When she met Mark, she thought she had found that kind of love. Mark was charming, attentive, and made Rebecca feel like the most important person in the world. Their relationship moved quickly, and within a year, they were living together in a cozy apartment in the city. Everything seemed perfect, and Rebecca was certain she had found her soulmate. But as time passed, subtle changes began to occur. Mark became more distant, often distracted and less present in their conversations. He started coming home late from work, offering vague excuses about meetings and deadlines. Rebecca tried to ignore the growing unease in her heart, convincing herself that he was just stressed and overworked. One evening, Mark came home later than usual, smelling of perfume that wasn't Rebecca's. When she questioned him, he brushed it off, saying it must have been from a colleague who had hugged him at the office. Rebecca wanted to believe him, but the doubt had already taken root in her mind. The following weeks were torturous for Rebecca. She began to notice more signs. Texts he quickly hid, phone calls he took in another room, and the way he seemed to avoid her gaze. She felt like she was losing him, and she didn't know why. The man who had once been so open and loving was slipping away from her, and it broke her heart. One day, while Mark was in the shower, Rebecca's curiosity got the best of her. She picked up his phone, her hands trembling as she scrolled through his messages. What she found confirmed her worst fears. There were dozens of texts from another woman, messages full of flirtation and intimacy that made Rebecca's stomach turn. The woman's name was Laura, and she was someone Mark had met at work. The messages revealed a relationship that had been going on for months, a relationship that had grown beyond just a harmless flirtation. Rebecca felt as if the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. The man she loved, the man she thought she would spend the rest of her life with, had betrayed her in the worst possible way. When Mark came out of the shower, he found Rebecca sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone in her hand, tears streaming down her face. He didn't need to ask what was wrong, he knew. The look of guilt on his face confirmed everything. He tried to explain, to apologize, but the damage was already done. Rebecca's trust had been shattered, and she couldn't unsee the messages she had read. In the days that followed, Rebecca was a shell of herself. She went through the motions of her daily life, but her heart wasn't in it. The betrayal had cut her deeply, and she couldn't shake the feeling of worthlessness that had settled over her. How could the man who had promised to love her forever do this to her? What had she done wrong? These questions haunted her, keeping her awake at night. Mark tried to make amends, but Rebecca couldn't bring herself to forgive him. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship was gone, replaced by doubt and insecurity. Every time she looked at him, she saw the betrayal in his eyes, and it tore her apart. Eventually, Rebecca made the difficult decision to leave. She packed her bags and moved out of the apartment they had shared, leaving behind the life they had built together. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she knew it was the only way to heal. Staying with Mark would have been a constant reminder of his betrayal, and Rebecca needed to find herself again, away from the pain he had caused. In the months that followed, Rebecca slowly began to rebuild her life. She focused on her career, reconnected with old friends, and started therapy to work through the pain. It wasn't easy, but she was determined not to let Mark's betrayal define her. She deserved better, and she knew it. As time passed, Rebecca began to find peace. She realized that Mark's betrayal wasn't a reflection of her worth, but of his own flaws. She had loved him deeply, and that love had been real, but it was time to let go and move on. She deserved a love that was honest and true, and she wouldn't settle for anything less. Story 7. The Secret Double Life. Lisa had always been the epitome of the perfect girlfriend. She was kind, thoughtful, and attentive to her partner Tom. They had been together for 5 years, and everyone in their circle believed they were the ideal couple, destined for a future filled with happiness. But behind the facade of their seemingly perfect relationship, Lisa was harboring a secret so deep that even she sometimes struggled to keep it hidden. Lisa and Tom had met in college and had quickly fallen in love. Their relationship progressed naturally, and soon they were living together in a charming apartment downtown. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. Two successful professionals in a loving relationship, sharing their lives and planning their future. But Lisa had a dark side, one that she kept well concealed from Tom and everyone else who knew her. Unbeknownst to Tom, Lisa had been leading a double life. By day, She was the devoted girlfriend, but by night, she transformed into someone entirely different. It had started innocently enough, a few flirtations with men she met online, a thrill she didn't quite understand but couldn't resist. Over time, those flirtations became more frequent, more daring, until they evolved into full-blown affairs. Lisa was addicted to the rush of excitement she felt with each new conquest. She would meet these men in secret, always careful to cover her tracks. The thrill of leading this double life was intoxicating, and it gave her a sense of power she had never experienced before. But as much as she enjoyed the thrill, she was also aware of the danger it posed to her relationship with Tom. The guilt gnawed at her, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. Tom, on the other hand, had no idea what was going on. He was deeply in love with Lisa and trusted her completely. He was planning to propose, even going so far as to pick out an engagement ring. He believed that their relationship was solid, built on mutual love and respect, and he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with her. Lisa's double life was well hidden, but as the saying goes, secrets have a way of coming out. One evening, while Tom was out with friends, Lisa was at home, chatting online with one of her secret lovers. She was so engrossed in the conversation that she didn't notice Tom had come home early. Tom walked into the living room, expecting to find Lisa relaxing with a book or watching TV. Instead, he found her on the couch, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop, a look of guilty surprise on her face. Tom's heart sank as he realized what was happening. He didn't say anything at first, too shocked to speak. But the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. Lisa quickly closed her laptop, trying to stammer out an explanation, but it was too late. Tom had seen enough. The days that followed were a blur of tears, arguments, and accusations. Lisa tried to apologize, to explain that she had never meant to hurt Tom, but her words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Tom was devastated. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew so well, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. Tom moved out of their apartment, leaving Lisa alone with her guilt and the wreckage of their relationship. The thrill that had once excited her now filled her with nothing but regret. She had thrown away a loving, stable relationship for fleeting moments of excitement, and now she had to live with the consequences. As the weeks turned into months, Lisa realized just how much she had lost. She missed Tom terribly, but more than that, she missed the life they had built together, the plans they had made, the future they had envisioned. She tried reaching out to him, hoping for a chance at reconciliation, but Tom was too hurt to even consider it. In the end, Lisa was left to face the reality of her choices. She had to confront the fact that her actions had not only destroyed her relationship but had also damaged her sense of self. The double life she had led was thrilling, but it had come at a cost that was far too high. Story 8. The Step-Parent Dilemma. Sophia was a successful career woman in her late 30s when she met Andrew. He was charming, intelligent, and had a warm smile that could light up a room. Andrew was a widower with a young daughter named Emily, who was just 10 years old. Despite her initial reservations about dating a man with a child, Sophia found herself falling for Andrew and, eventually, for Emily as well. They were a package deal, and Sophia was willing to embrace it. Sophia had never imagined herself as a stepmother, but she was determined to make it work. She loved Andrew, and she wanted to create a happy, stable family with him and Emily. However, the reality of being a stepmother was far more challenging than she had anticipated. Emily was still grieving the loss of her mother, and though she was polite to Sophia, there was an undeniable distance between them. Sophia tried everything to bond with Emily, taking her out for ice cream, helping her with homework, and even attending her school events. But no matter what she did, it always felt like Emily was keeping her at arm's length. Andrew assured Sophia that it would just take time for Emily to warm up to her. He believed that with patience and love, their little family would eventually find harmony. Sophia wanted to believe him, but as the months passed, she began to feel like an outsider in her own home. Things came to a head one evening when Andrew had to work late, leaving Sophia and Emily alone for dinner. Sophia had prepared one of Emily's favorite meals, hoping it would be a chance for them to connect. But when she called Emily to the table, the young girl refused to come down from her room. After several attempts to coax Emily out, Sophia finally went upstairs. She found Emily sitting on her bed, her arms crossed, with a defiant look on her face. "I'm not hungry," Emily said flatly, not meeting Sophia's gaze. Sophia sighed, feeling her patience wearing thin. "Emily, I made your favorite, spaghetti and meatballs. Can't you at least try to eat something?" Emily finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and anger. "You're not my mom," she said quietly. "You can't make me do anything." The words hit Sophia like a punch to the gut. She knew she wasn't Emily's mother, but hearing it said so bluntly brought all her insecurities to the surface. She had tried so hard to be a good stepmother, but it was clear that Emily still saw her as an intruder. Sophia knelt down beside the bed, trying to keep her voice calm. "Emily, I know I'm not your mom. I'm not trying to replace her. But I do care about you, and I want us to be friends." Emily's expression softened slightly, but the distance was still there. "I miss my mom," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Sophia's heart broke for the little girl. She reached out to touch Emily's hand, but Emily pulled away. "I know you do," Sophia said gently. "And I'm so sorry you lost her. I can't imagine how hard that must be. But I'm here if you ever want to talk about it." Emily nodded but didn't say anything else. Sophia knew it would take more than one conversation to bridge the gap between them, but she was determined to keep trying. She loved Andrew, and she wanted to be a positive presence in Emily's life, even if it meant being patient and letting Emily come to her on her own terms. As the weeks passed, things remained strained between Sophia and Emily. Andrew noticed the tension but didn't know how to fix it. He was caught between his love for Sophia and his responsibility to Emily, and it weighed heavily on him. One day, Emily came home from school in tears. She had been bullied by some girls in her class who had made cruel remarks about her mother's death. Sophia found Emily crying in her room and immediately went to comfort her. This time, Emily didn't push her away. She allowed Sophia to sit beside her on the bed, and for the first time, Emily opened up about how much she missed her mom and how hard it was to adjust to life without her. Sophia listened, her heart aching for the little girl who had been through so much. She didn't try to offer solutions or platitudes. She just let Emily talk, offering comfort with her presence. After that day, something shifted between them. Emily still missed her mother, and Sophia knew that would never change. But slowly, Emily began to let her guard down. They started spending more time together, and Emily even began to seek out Sophia's company. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of tension, but the distance between them was closing. Andrew noticed the change and was grateful to Sophia for her patience and love. He knew it hadn't been easy for her, and he appreciated the effort she had put into building a relationship with Emily. As time went on, their little family began to find a new rhythm. Sophia and Emily were never going to have the same relationship that Emily had with her mother, but they had something special in their own right. They had built a bond based on mutual respect and understanding, and for that, Sophia was grateful. Story 9. The Cheating Heart. Nina had always considered herself a loyal and devoted girlfriend. She and Jack had been together for almost 3 years, and everyone around them thought they were the perfect couple. They had met at a friend's party, and from that moment on, their connection was undeniable. They shared dreams, supported each other through tough times, and had even started talking about a future together. But as they settled into the comfort of their relationship, something began to change. It started slowly, just a subtle shift in Nina's feelings that she couldn't quite put her finger on. She still loved Jack, but the excitement and passion that had once been so intense began to fade. The long workdays, the predictable routines, and the stress of daily life started to take a toll on their relationship. Nina found herself feeling restless and unfulfilled, craving something more but not knowing what that was. Then one day, while attending a work conference in another city, Nina met Lucas. He was everything that Jack wasn't: spontaneous, adventurous, and completely unpredictable. There was an instant attraction between them, and despite her better judgment, Nina found herself drawn to him in a way she hadn't felt in years. Lucas was flirtatious, charming, and knew exactly how to make Nina feel alive again. What started as innocent conversations over coffee soon turned into late-night texts and secret meetings. Nina knew she was crossing a line, but she couldn't stop herself. The thrill of the forbidden, the excitement of something new, was intoxicating. Lucas made her feel wanted, desired, and special in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Back home, Jack remained oblivious to Nina's growing infatuation with another man. He was busy with work, and though he noticed that Nina seemed distracted, he assumed it was just the stress of her job. He trusted her completely and never imagined that she would be unfaithful. Nina's affair with Lucas continued for several months. She lived a double life, devoted girlfriend by day and passionate lover by night. But as the excitement of the affair wore off, the guilt began to set in. Nina knew she was betraying Jack, the man who had always been there for her, who loved her unconditionally. She started to feel trapped between her desire for Lucas and her love for Jack. One evening, as Nina was getting ready to meet Lucas, Jack walked into the room with a look of concern on his face. He had noticed the changes in her behavior, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, and the emotional distance that had grown between them. He had tried to ignore it, to brush it off as just a rough patch, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Nina, is everything okay?" Jack asked, his voice filled with worry. Nina froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been dreading this moment, knowing that sooner or later, the truth would come out. But she wasn't prepared for it to happen now, not when she was still so torn between her feelings for Lucas and her love for Jack. "I'm fine," Nina replied, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." Jack wasn't convinced. He reached out and took her hand, looking deep into her eyes. "Nina, if something's bothering you, you can tell me. You know that, right?" Tears welled up in Nina's eyes as the weight of her deception threatened to crush her. She knew she couldn't keep living this lie, but she also couldn't bear the thought of hurting Jack, of destroying the life they had built together. I have to go," Nina stammered, pulling her hand away and grabbing her coat. Jack watched her leave, a sinking feeling in his stomach. He didn't know where she was going, but he knew something was seriously wrong. As Nina drove to meet Lucas, her mind was in turmoil. She thought about Jack, the man who had always been there for her, who loved her with all his heart. She thought about the future they had planned together, and how she was risking it all for a fleeting affair with a man who could never offer her the same security and love that Jack did. When Nina arrived at the cafe where she was supposed to meet Lucas, she sat in her car for a long time, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her, a woman who had betrayed the man she loved, a woman who had become a stranger to herself. In that moment, Nina made a decision. She couldn't keep living this double life, lying to Jack and pretending that everything was okay. She had to end the affair, no matter how much it hurt, and try to repair the damage she had done to her relationship with Jack. Nina walked into the cafe and found Lucas waiting for her. He smiled when he saw her, but she didn't return it. She sat down across from him, her heart heavy with the words she needed to say. "Lucas, I can't do this anymore," Nina said, her voice trembling. "I love Jack, and I can't keep betraying him like this. It's over." Lucas looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had known from the beginning that their relationship was doomed, that it was built on nothing but lust and secrecy. He nodded, accepting her decision without argument. "I understand," Lucas replied. "I hope you find happiness, Nina." With that, Nina got up and walked out of the cafe, leaving Lucas and the affair behind. She drove home, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. She knew that ending the affair was the right thing to do, but she also knew that she had a long road ahead of her to repair the damage she had done to her relationship with Jack. When Nina arrived home, she found Jack waiting for her, his face etched with concern. She took a deep breath and walked over to him, ready to tell him the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Jack, we need to talk," Nina said, her voice shaking. Jack nodded, his heart pounding with dread. "I'm listening." Nina took his hands in hers, tears streaming down her face. "I've been unfaithful," she confessed. "I've been seeing someone else, but I ended it. I'm so sorry, Jack. I know I've hurt you, and I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I needed to tell you the truth." Jack felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He had suspected something was wrong, but hearing the words from Nina's lips was a blow he hadn't been prepared for. He pulled his hands away from hers, trying to process what she had just told him. "Nina, why?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nina sobbed, unable to find the words to explain her actions. She knew there was no excuse for what she had done, and she hated herself for the pain she had caused Jack. "I don't know," Nina admitted, her voice choked with tears. "I was unhappy, restless, but that's no excuse. I should have talked to you, but instead, I betrayed you. I'm so sorry, Jack. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." Jack looked at her, his heart torn between anger, hurt, and the love he still felt for her. He didn't know if he could forgive Nina, if they could ever rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But he also knew that love wasn't something you could just turn off, no matter how much someone had hurt you. "I need some time," Jack finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Nina, but I need to think." Nina nodded, understanding the gravity of what she had done. She watched as Jack walked away, her heart breaking for the man she loved and the future she had jeopardized. Over the next few weeks, Nina and Jack barely spoke. Jack stayed with a friend, needing space to process everything that had happened. Nina was left alone with her guilt and the fear that she had lost Jack for good. But despite everything, Jack couldn't stop thinking about Nina. He remembered the good times they had shared, the love that had once been so strong between them. He knew that forgiveness wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that he wasn't ready to give up on their relationship without a fight. One evening, Jack returned to their apartment. Nina was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn from weeks of crying and sleepless nights. When she saw Jack, her heart leaped with hope, but she also knew that nothing was certain. "Nina, I've been doing a lot of thinking," Jack began, his voice calm but firm. "What you did hurt me deeply, and it's going to take time for me to heal. But I love you, and I'm willing to try to make this work if you are. But it's not going to be easy, and we're going to have to rebuild trust from the ground up." Nina nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Jack. I love you, and I'm so sorry for everything I've done." With that, Jack sat down beside Nina, and for the first time in weeks, they talked, really talked, about their relationship, their future, and how they could move forward. It wasn't a quick fix, and it wouldn't be easy, but they both knew that love was worth fighting for. As Nina and Jack began the long road to healing, they learned the importance of communication, trust, and forgiveness. They knew that their relationship would never be the same, but they also knew that with time. Story 10. The Ghosts of the Past. Margaret had always been the pillar of strength in her family. A successful lawyer with a reputation for being tough as nails, she had built a life that many envied. She had a beautiful home, a loving husband named Tom, and 2 grown children who had followed in her footsteps of success. But behind her composed exterior, Margaret carried a burden that she had never shared with anyone, until one fateful night. The evening had begun like any other. Margaret and Tom were hosting a small dinner party for a few close friends. The wine was flowing, the conversation was lively, and the atmosphere was filled with warmth and laughter. But as the night wore on, Margaret began to feel a growing sense of unease. She had always prided herself on her ability to maintain control, but that night, something inside her was unraveling. After the guests had left and Tom had gone to bed, Margaret found herself alone in the living room, staring into the flickering flames of the fireplace. The silence of the house was comforting, yet it also seemed to amplify the thoughts that she had tried so hard to suppress for years. The memories she had buried deep in the recesses of her mind began to resurface, and with them, a flood of emotions she hadn't felt in decades. Margaret's mind drifted back to her youth, to a time when she had been a different person, a scared, vulnerable girl trying to survive in a world that had been cruel to her. She had grown up in a small town, in a home where love was scarce and pain was plentiful. Her father had been a man of few words, but his fists had spoken volumes. Her mother, broken by years of abuse, had retreated into herself, leaving Margaret to fend for herself and her younger brother James. James had been the one bright spot in Margaret's dark childhood. He was kind, gentle, and had a spirit that refused to be crushed, no matter how hard their father tried. Margaret had always felt a deep sense of responsibility for James, and she had done everything in her power to protect him from the worst of their father's wrath. But one night, when Margaret was just 16, her world came crashing down. Their father had returned home in a drunken rage, and this time, his anger was directed at James. Margaret had tried to intervene, to shield her brother from the blows, but she was no match for their father's fury. In the chaos that followed, James had been badly injured. Margaret had managed to get him to the hospital, but the damage had been done. James survived, but the incident left him scarred, both physically and emotionally. The guilt of that night had haunted Margaret ever since. She had always blamed herself for not being able to protect James, for not being strong enough to stop their father. After that night, she had vowed to leave the town and never look back. She had worked hard, putting herself through law school and building a life that was far removed from the horrors of her past. But no matter how successful she became, she could never escape the ghosts of that night. As Margaret sat in the dimly lit living room, the memories overwhelmed her. She could almost hear the echoes of her father's voice, the sound of his fists against flesh, and the cries of her brother. The pain that she had kept buried for so long was now bubbling to the surface, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it. Just then, Tom entered the room, concerned by the sight of his wife sitting alone in the dark. He had always known that Margaret had a past she didn't talk about, but he had never pressed her for details. He respected her privacy, but seeing her like this, he knew something was deeply wrong. "Margaret, are you okay?" Tom asked softly, sitting down beside her. Margaret didn't respond immediately. She continued to stare into the fire, her mind racing with memories and emotions. Finally, she turned to Tom, her eyes filled with tears. "I've been running from something for a long time," Margaret whispered. "Something I've never told you about." Tom took her hand in his, sensing that whatever she was about to share was something that had been weighing on her for years. "You can tell me, Margaret. Whatever it is, I'm here for you." Margaret took a deep breath and began to recount the story of her childhood, the abuse she had endured, and the night that had changed her life forever. She told Tom about her brother James, and the guilt she had carried with her for not being able to protect him. As she spoke, the tears flowed freely, and with them, a sense of relief that she had never felt before. Tom listened intently, his heart breaking for the woman he loved. He had always admired Margaret's strength, but now he understood the true depth of that strength, the strength it had taken to survive her childhood, to build a life for herself, and to carry the weight of her past without ever letting it show. When Margaret had finished her story, she felt exhausted but also strangely lighter, as if a burden she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. She looked at Tom, worried about how he would react, but all she saw in his eyes was love and compassion. "Margaret, you've been through so much," Tom said, his voice choked with emotion. "But you don't have to carry this alone anymore. I'm here for you, and we'll get through this together." For the first time in her life, Margaret felt truly seen and understood. She had always prided herself on her independence, on not needing anyone's help, but in that moment, she realized that she didn't have to be strong all the time. She had someone who loved her, who was willing to stand by her side, no matter what. Over the next few weeks, Margaret began to open up more about her past, sharing stories and memories that she had kept hidden for so long. With Tom's support, she also reached out to her brother James, whom she had lost contact with over the years. Their reunion was emotional, and though the scars of their childhood would never fully heal, they found solace in knowing that they had each other. Margaret also sought therapy, something she had always resisted, believing that she could handle her problems on her own. But through therapy, she learned to confront her past in a healthy way, to forgive herself for what had happened, and to let go of the guilt that had haunted her for so long. As Margaret continued to heal, she realized that the strength she had always relied on didn't have to come from being tough or stoic. True strength came from vulnerability, from allowing herself to feel, to grieve, and to heal. And in doing so, she found a new sense of peace and freedom that she had never known before. The ghosts of Margaret's past would always be a part of her, but they no longer held power over her. She had faced them, acknowledged them, and in doing so, she had taken back control of her life. And with Tom by her side, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was no longer alone. As the years passed, Margaret and Tom grew closer than ever. Their love deepened as they navigated life's ups and downs together, and they found joy in the simple moments of everyday life. Margaret's past was no longer a shadow that loomed over her. It was a part of her story, a testament to her resilience and strength. And in the quiet moments, when the world was still and the only sound was the crackling of the fire, Margaret would think back to that night when she had finally opened up to Tom. It was the night that had changed everything. The night she had stopped running from her past and had finally found the courage to face it head on.